You're kicking off the weekend with the Spill Sports Show. Listen every Friday on KRNU2 or 24/7 on thespillkrnu.wordpress.com.
We are talking about people that play games for money.
I love to bring a Jersey Shore type feel.
That makes me angry. That makes me sad. That gets me fired up.
Here's your hosts, Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, and Scott Ayers.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Spill Sports Show. We are live worldwide on KRNU2. Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, Scott Ayers, the royalty of radio roundtables, kicking off your weekend with sports talk. College basketball teams are often judged by RPI, which measures everything from wins and losses to strength of schedule. Well, Michigan State Director of Basketball Operations Kevin Pauga developed a much better system that he calls the KPI, and we have him with us today. Kevin, thanks so much for joining the show.
Good to be here.
So on your website, kpisports.net, you explain that you've always been kind of a math junkie. What inspired you to create this system for college basketball?
You know, it was something several years ago where it's had several purposes over the years. The idea originally came from a better way to kind of quantify what a win and what a loss kind of meant. And as we were kind of building some non-conference schedules at Michigan State, and we were kind of doing some different things relative to taping games and doing different things that were kind of part of my role as it's evolved over the years. We were kind of looking for a way to quantify it. So we kind of broke down and set up KPI where it assigns a value to every game played and measures whether that game's home, away, neutral, what the score is of the game, who you're playing, the quality of the opponent, the quality of the strength of schedule, et cetera, in order to kind of come up with those one numbers. Every game counts as one, and from there now we're kind of at a point where some people are taking notice of it, and it's been pretty accurate over the years.
Yeah, I've looked at some of your plus-minus system as far as assigning the best win is +1 and the worst loss is -1, whereas the best or the worst win is plus 0.01, and the best loss is minus 0.01.
More or less, yeah.
Where do you see the RPI having major pitfalls, and how does KPI fix that?
You know, I think that, and there's certainly some value to the RPI, just as there is with several other metrics when it comes to KenPom and Sagarin and Massey and BPI. I think that if anything, the more metrics that people are looking at, the better in some ways. And when you start to see some consistency from metric to metric, there's some power to that. When one metric lists somebody as an outlier from the other five, it causes some time to kind of hit the pause button and say, well, why is Team X ranked this in this metric, but in the other 5 or 6 metrics that the committee's using, it's a completely different number, and that's where you can kind of identify more detail about a team's resume, and if anything, try to identify the purpose behind what's causing the outlier.
Speaking of kind of outliers, we were talking about in the last segment, we're not sure that Virginia deserves to be super high on the RPI. They're number 2 in RPI right now, but they're 5 and 6 on the road. Where does KPI have them, and why do you think their RPI is so strong?
So Virginia's number 2 in KPI right now, and as much as they're 5 and 6 on the road, they do have 5 neutral court wins. They're 10 and 6 in road neutral games. And they've played an incredible strength of schedule, and strength of schedules right now at 4. So to be at 25 and 6 with a strength schedule of 4, they're 13 and they finished 13 and 5 in the regular season in the ACC. They've got you're right that they've got some road losses. Virginia Tech, George Washington come to mind, but they've also got some really good wins. Their win at Louisville into January is their highest ranked win right now, and the level that they win and beat a Louisville team that despite not being eligible for the postseason is still pretty darn good. They've been able to do several things that other people haven't.
Yeah, absolutely. And they look like a trendy tournament pick right now. It might end up being on the one line, especially because the committee really values RPI. How have you evolved KPI? Have the algorithms changed? And what have you done to kind of help your brand as far as marketing KPI as the great system that it is?
Yeah, so early on it was something that was very much just kind of a hobby that sat in an Excel file on a laptop and kind of stayed updated. And as it's evolved and as its accuracy has maybe been noticed a little bit, you're right that the whole concept behind it has kind of evolved as well. And I did a little bit of tweaking on the formula early on, just kind of not trying to change anything, but trying to get it more exact and precise. And but for the last several years now, it's pretty much been the same thing. It's not something that I don't think that changing it from year to year or changing it often is a good thing. I think that consistency from year to year helps people understand it. I think that's true with most anything. But there was definitely some adjustments early on as more and more data was kind of being run through the system, and the formula kind of evolved from there.
And Kevin, thanks so much for joining us again. Now I'm looking at your KPI rankings right now, and it has Duke at number 12 with their high game, obviously against North Carolina. They got .86 out of that. Why is Duke number 12? Granted that they are 5-8 against the top 50, and what seed would you have them in the NCAA tournament as of right now?
Yeah, so a little bit actually evolved just this afternoon, where Duke's now sitting at 14, just with how some things have kind of affected some data points already in the noon games today. So Duke's at 14, and using the math that would translate to a 4 seed, and So KPI math says Duke's a 4, and you're right about that North Carolina win was certainly huge for them. Their ACC tournament's over now, and I'm sure that they're looking forward to Selection Sunday here in a couple days.
So we've been talking a lot about the top dogs, but from KPI standings, who do you have as your last 4 in, and how does that differ from the RPI rankings?
Yeah, so last year the formula had 66 out of 68 teams, and there were two instances. Colorado State, by the math, Colorado State was in the field, and by the math, Old Dominion was in the field, and then what actually happened was UCLA and Purdue made it. Purdue and Old Dominion were quite literally within. It was about 4 10,000ths of a point within one another for the last spot. So their resumes were virtually even, but it was incredibly close. But the math said one way. It was close enough that if the VCU Atlantic 10 final on that last day of the season had gone the opposite way that it did, it would have actually flipped it and would have had 67 out of 68. So there's a human element to this whole process.
Right.
There's other metrics that the committee does and should look at. I think that to have more information is a good thing, and to be able to quantify things on a game-by-game basis where whoever it is that's looking at a team's resume can kind of quantify what a win means, what a loss means. It kind of gives that perspective where everything started at 0 at the beginning of the season. There's no preconceived notions. There's not. I'm not here telling you what a road win versus a home win is valued at. The formula is doing that work based on the data to date. So while I definitely wrote the formula, I'm letting the numbers kind of do the talking and whatever that means in terms of ranking each Division I team's men's basketball race.
So I'm noticing that Monmouth is down at 81. We talked about them last segment as being kind of a fan favorite team. Obviously, they have the really animated bench and a few good wins on the year. What metrics make them so low down at 81?
Yeah, so just to clarify a little bit, so Monmouth's 81st, and the 81 number that you're looking at includes the 68 teams in the field, and then the 32 teams behind it. So Monmouth's KPI number, if you will, is 67. But with the AQs that are on the seed list, they're bumped in front of Monmouth because they've qualified for the tournament. That's where the discrepancy in those two numbers comes in. So you're right about Monmouth. They beat an Iona team on the road that ultimately won the Metro Atlantic, and they've got wins against USC. They've got wins against Notre Dame. They actually ended up splitting the season series with USC. Just they played an on-campus game as part of the Advocare Invitational in Orlando, and then ended up meeting them again in what turned out to be a really sneaky good field in Orlando. I don't know that anybody kind of saw it that way at the time, but that field had Notre Dame and USC and Wichita State and Iowa and Alabama and Monmouth and some of these teams that. Like I said, it may not have looked at the time Xavier was in that field too, but that field ended up being pretty doggone good, and that's where Monmouth had some success and kind of set their bench on national news for all sorts of fun reasons. So the Monmouth story is one that I think it's important because. All schedules aren't created equally, and they definitely got their opportunities to play some people in the non-conference, and they had some success there, and they had some success in the conference too. I mean, let's not lose sight of the fact that they won a regular season championship in the Metro Atlantic and ended up losing in the final to Iona. So I kind of let the metrics speak for itself in terms of where they sit numerically. In that 67, and obviously their data points are finished for the year, but certainly been a fun team to watch for the better part of this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at those tournaments; they schedule years in advance, and you never know which tournament will start to produce some of the better teams.
And Kevin, as I'm looking at the KPI Top 100, I noticed that the highest point value in a win was Iowa against Michigan State, but Michigan State, Denzel Valentine was just coming back from injury. Does injury have an impact on the KPI or the win? Is it in the algorithm anywhere?
It's not. It's not. But that's an important. It's an important distinction. What I'm letting the data do is I'm letting it talk as though everything's even keel. And you're right that was, I think, Denzel's second game back from injury.
And he was very limited in the first game, if I remember correctly, as well.
He didn't start at Penn State and played fewer minutes, and then that Iowa game was the first game that he had started back after missing the first Michigan State-Iowa meeting. And there's all sorts of schools of thought relative to the injury side of things, and I'll give you two perspectives. One is that if somebody's short a guy and they get a quality win, they want credit for that win. If let's play out the reverse side, and let's say that Michigan State without Denzel Valentine had won at Iowa in the end of December. Denzel's not playing, and Michigan State's going to want credit for what in that case would be a very good win at Iowa. So there's some perspective there that has to kind of come in, but yet because KPI is set up on a game-by-game basis, what it allows for is taking that value out if you so choose. So, hey, let's say that Michigan State is sitting where it's at 10 in the KPI right now. If you want to take out a certain game because of an injury, you take that out and divide by one fewer game, and now you've got maybe an algorithmic way of quantifying specific information that you're looking for. So there's certainly a little creative control that goes into that, but I think it's important to note that you want credit when that game's a quality win. You want to make sure that you get credit for that too.
I think one team that's very interesting in this ranking is Wichita State. Both Matt and David really didn't agree with where they were seated, thought that they should be maybe a last four in or maybe a first four out. The Shockers are currently ranked in KPI 34th. What really on their resume impressed you guys, and a reason why this team really deserves to be in the tournament?
So their best win is that win over Utah,
right?
And it was a pretty convincing win over a team that's had great success in the Pac-12, and I think that it's important to note that what Wichita and what schools like Wichita have is they may lack some scheduling opportunities, they may lack some top 50 games, but a win against somebody that's in the 51 to 100 range is more quantifiable and worth more, frankly, than a win that's 165th or 222nd. I mean, it's not 1 to 50 and everybody else. And while there were some teams at the bottom of the Missouri Valley that struggled a little bit, there were also some teams at the top of the valley. Evansville comes to mind for sure. Northern Iowa, who beat several teams, including North Carolina and Iowa State. The valley had some good teams at the top. So. You're right that Wichita struggled in Orlando, and the injuries that they had preseason aren't quantified in the metric, though they could be by pulling it out on a game by game basis. It's kind of ironic to sit here and say that Wichita ended up finishing 8th out of 8 in that Advocare Invitational, and yet the discussion is what it is. But KPI math says that they're in the 9 seed range. Whether that holds true, we'll find out. Again, I kind of like to defer to the math and let that kind of do the talking sometimes. And yet that Utah win certainly is going to be a big part of why they get into the tournament if they do in fact make it.
We've talked a lot about mid-majors. What's one mid-major you see making a kind of a nice run in the tournament? And while we're on the subject, one top team that you see maybe performing extremely well when March Madness rolls around next week?
Yeah, you bring up Wichita, and that's a dangerous team, and there's been a lot written and said about them. It's interesting to see because there's a few teams that like in Arkansas Little Rock that's won 27 games, and they still have to kind of finish out the deal in the Sun Belt, their tournament championships this weekend. But Northern Iowa comes to mind. There's a Chattanooga team that had some success in the non-conference that comes to mind. They've already kind of qualified out of the Southern Conference and kind of in that 12 seed range. UNC Wilmington's kind of in that same group, where the classic 12-5, which so much of what happens in the 12-5 is because the 12 seed tends to be the best of the at-large teams. That's really what generates that 12 seed upset.
So your guys are in Indianapolis right now for the Big Ten tournament. If you guys win today and Nebraska wins tonight, we might see a Nebraska-Michigan State matchup. What have you seen from the Big Ten tournament that you've liked so far? And do you think Michigan State has it this year and can pull it out?
Yeah, Michigan State. We've had a really good year so far. Didn't necessarily finish in the Big Ten where we would have liked to, and yet I think that you're seeing so far with the quality of play that's taken place here in Indianapolis that the depth of the Big Ten is pretty solid, and the Michigan Northwestern game yesterday was hotly contested. Illinois, Iowa yesterday, Michigan, Indiana today already, and Nebraska beaten a Wisconsin team that has been playing very, very well. It's just kind of a testament that it's interesting that Nebraska and Illinois were the two teams that won on Wednesday, and then they ended up continuing that momentum into Thursday. And I don't know how much there is. I think it's just kind of a struggle to quantify how much it means to have the advantage or disadvantage of playing a bye versus getting your feet wet and winning that first game, and have played 40 minutes on the championship court, where you don't know which is necessarily better. I think most coaches would tell you they'd rather the bye. But I think it'll be interesting today with Illinois and Nebraska both playing their third game in 3 days against teams that are playing their first game in almost a week, what that means and what ends up coming of it.
We'll see if momentum carries over instead of the resting time. Everyone should keep an eye on kpisports.net if they want to have a successful bracket. I know we'll reference the KPI rankings when we do our bracket breakdown Sunday night. Kevin, thanks so much for coming on.
I appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Well, it might be a long shot, but Nebraska is still alive for a berth in the NCAA tournament. We'll discuss the Big Reds' win over Wisconsin and look ahead to today's matchup with Maryland next. Stay with us. This is the Spill Sports Show.